goldene Chianti Wein.
Ciao, buongiorno. Ich bin Nina und ich liebe Chianti Classico. Und hier bin ich wieder mit einer neuen Episode zu meinem Podcast Auf ein Glas Wein mit Nina in Chianti. Mit diesem Podcast will ich dich mitnehmen in meine Chianti Classico Welt und dich teilhaben lassen an Gesprächen mit Winzern, an meinen Eindrücken hier in Chianti und dir so viel wie möglich über Chianti Classico erzählen. Heute bin ich einer Einladung von Michael Schmelzer gefolgt, dem Inhaber von Weingut Monte Bernardi. Monte Bernardi befindet sich in Panzano in Chianti und die Familie Schmelzer hat das Weingut 2003 gekauft. Michael hat über mehrere Umwege zum Wein gefunden und ich für mich habe ihm den Spitznamen Mr. Sangiovese gegeben. Einfach weil ich finde, dass Michael ein ganz besonderes Gespür für die Rebsorte Sangiovese hat, vielleicht auch, weil er insgesamt einen anderen Zugang zum Weinbau hat. Und das drückt sich natürlich im Charakter der Weine von Monte Bernardi aus. Aber all das erzählt Michael selbst in unserem gemeinsamen Gespräch. Lass dich also mitnehmen in die Welt von Michael und seinem Weingut Monte Bernardi. Und weil Michael in den USA aufgewachsen ist, habe ich das Gespräch mit ihm in Englisch geführt.
Buongiorno, Michael. Thank you for being here with me for a new podcast show. We are sitting here at your winery, Monte Bernardi in Panzano in Chianti. We have a wonderful view over your vineyards. The vineyards are now very nice colored. It's a perfect day. It's very nice to see all these colors and all this impression. Beautiful to be here. But before we start, following the title of my podcast, For a Glass of Wine with Nina in Chianti, we have a glass of wine by our side. Could you tell us what is in our glass?
Yes, thank you, first of all, for inviting me, Nina. We've known each other a long time. Mm-hmm. You've even harvested with us.
2015.
2015.
A good vintage.
Very abundant.
I didn't destroy it. It was difficult it would be difficult to destroy because the grapes have been in a perfect condition in this vintage.
I say if you didn't make a good wine in 2015, you should hang up your shoes or your shears, because it was one of those years that was quite easy. Whereas, the harder years are the vintages that actually get more pleasure out of, and I think really show more of your philosophy and your capabilities probably as a winemaker and a producer. But 15 was fun.
Yeah, 15 was fun. We had a lot of fun as well. And I had a lot of back pain on the next day.
But you didn't do it enough time then.
Yeah, I used to do it as I have been a child because my parents as well had vineyards and so. But they have been gone at least 30 years between that.
I enjoy that part of the year very much. I don't like sitting on the tractor. I don't like waiting for the grapes to come in. I'm there picking all day, every day, because I like to see the grapes in each parcel, and the condition. I like moving, and I don't like. I can't imagine sitting in a winery waiting for the grapes to come in. So it's a great time. We enjoy that period so much. It's such a relief, and so we just finished our 2021 not too long ago. So that is my 19th harvest.
Yes, Wahnsinn.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And now we have also a lot of experience.
Yeah. It's getting there. Next year's 20.
Yeah.
It goes by very quickly.
Mama, yeah. So what do we have now in the glass?
In the glass, we have a new wine for us. In December 2018, we purchased some new vineyards above Panzano. So Monte Bernardi is on the main road south of the town, about 4 kilometers roughly. And there we've had 15 hectares of vineyards since 2011. But we were thinking about the future, had a couple of difficult years with frost, and we decided to look for new vineyards, and I had known of these vineyards quite a long time, and they are above Panzano as you go up the dirt road to Volpaia, and they're about 500 meters in altitude on your right. It's called Sala, and we bought 10 hectares of vineyards there, and 9 hectares are younger, roughly 2003 to the youngest are around 2010 planted vineyards, all Chianti Classico. And then we have 1 hectare, very special hectare of 1933 old field blend vineyard from there as well. But what we have here is the Sangiovese, which comes from the 9 hectares of the younger vineyards. It's 100% Sangiovese, and it's a beautiful expression that's quite different than our Retromarcia that we're known for, as our Classico that comes around the estate here below Panzano. It's more plummy and blood orange and kind of spicy, and the Retromarcia is more like black cherry and pepper and quite a different expression. So it's kind of fun to have the ability to make 2 Chianti Classicos from the same town with
but a different terroir.
Soil-wise, it's pretty similar.
Okay.
We have a lot of Golestro, Pietraforte. We don't have any Albarese up there, which we have up 10% in the Retromarcia. Surprisingly, even though it's higher in altitude, it ripens at the same time as the vineyards around here, which is always challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's quite windy up there, and so we get more of what I think is kind of associate with Montalcino, that kind of blood orange characteristic, which I think is related to the wind on the Sangiovese. Whereas down here at Monte Bernardi, we have less wind and we have more freshness. We're surrounded by the river Pesa, so we get a very nice black cherry kind of fresher expression. So both are lovely.
Yeah,
so
I like it. So chin chin. This is to taste. I like it.
Yeah.
And I like the new label as well. It's for me, it's have fun.
Yeah.
It's the expression, just have fun. Open it and have fun with me. So
and that's the name Sangiovese, is to be like fun, kind of play on the word Sangiovese.
Yeah.
Like the wine, it should be fun. This one is in conversion organic, so we had to create a new label because all of our other wines are certified organic. And now the 2021 was the last in conversion. Vintage. Next year it will be certified as well. And then we might start putting some into the Retromarcia, because the intention to buy it was to be able to grow the Retromarcia, which we don't make enough
of quantity for that, because Retromarcia now is
very popular.
Is let me say almost a brand.
Yeah, I know. It's our workhorse, and it's very special to us. But we'd like more Panzano vineyards to grow it, but of course it had to go through the conversion, and we also, the way we farm is quite different in many ways, and there's mental and physical conversion in that as well, other than organic conversion. So
you mentioned the Retromarcia. Retromarcia is one of the things they come up to my mind, key facts, when I'm thinking of Monte Bernardi. The first is always you went once around the world to end up in Panzano. It's your personal story to come here. You can from from many parts of the world to end here in Panzano, which is not the worst, I would say. Then Retromarcia is also a key fact for me. It's not only the wine Retromarcia, because Retromarcia you will perhaps later on explain us the word, but for me it's it's a symbol word for me, that what you are doing, exactly, back to the tradition, to learn from the old, let me say. Right. And my special nickname for you is Mr. Sangiovese, because I'm convinced you understand. Perhaps you are not from here. Sangiovese in a very, very special way, and I have a very nice own interpretation of Sangiovese. And I have to be honored. Yes, I love it. And I know Monte Bernardi wines since many, many years, long before you bought Monte Bernardi. And I was always crazy for Saetta, and still it is, so it's nothing changed. First of all, let us give a little overview about the winery Monte Bernardi. Monte Bernardi, you mentioned, is located in the south part of Panzano in Chianti. Panzano is a little village, let me say, located in the middle of Chianti, in the heart of Chianti, almost pretty much exactly in the middle between Florence and Siena, because when you are standing on the piazza, you see the signs 31 kilometers to Siena, 31 kilometers to Florence. I think this is very funny.
It's a great location, and we look out on what they call the belly button. When you look out the window, you see this big exaggerated curve, and they call that the belly button of Chianti Classico, supposedly the center. So, but to me, what makes this area special, being in the center of Chianti Classico, which is 8,000 hectares of vineyards, is that it's one of the central regions that has high altitude, steep slopes, rocky soils, a big drop in temperature at night, and that really gives us an ability that's unique and special to express a Sangiovese that I think is much less common than other areas of Tuscany and Italy. So that, going back to kind of what you said, my philosophy, Retromarcia, it really does come from that idea that I wanted to return to Sangiovese di una volta, we say, Sangiovese from the past of that time, because as someone who studied winemaking and viticulture in Australia and made wines there for other people, I started to realize that we were all making the same mistakes. We were all taking great historic places, grape varieties, and kind of turning them all into the same wine. Mm-hmm. And I saw that when I came to Panzano, I wanted to bring out the characteristics that I thought were special and unique. Mm-hmm. So to me, that meant moving away from new barrels and small barrels and non-traditional grape varieties in our denomination, Chianti Classico wines, and taking longer time to age it, and also going back to practices that the old farmers used to do that have almost completely disappeared.
So you're born and grown up in the United States?
I was actually born in Italy.
I was born in Italy.
Ivrea, yeah. Because of my father's job. But yes, then we moved to France. My brother was born in France. My older sister was born in Michigan. But then after my brother was born, shortly after, we did move to the States, and we lived in Michigan for about 10 years. Yeah. And then I finished high school in Germany, international school near Frankfurt. And then I went back to university in Colorado. And then I went to Australia to study winemaking viticulture. Actually, in between those two degrees, I did Le Cordon Bleu's cuisine and pastry degree, which is what actually got me into wine. That was
yes, I remember. You told me you have been in France. In France, and with this education, you turned to wine. Let me say.
Yeah, I realized there was a much better thing out there for me, let's say, because I was always passionate about cooking from a very young age, but I realized pretty quickly that I didn't want to cook in a kitchen for the rest of my life. But we were taking these elective classes, and it was winemaking education classes, and every other weekend we would actually go to a new region in France and meet winemakers and start. It really, really opened my eyes at how much of an art it was, and how complex it was as a industry and a subject, and it really grabbed me. So once I finished my already started degrees, I said to my parents that I wanted to go study winemaking and viticulture, and so
you went to Australia, the other part, let me say,
the world.
Also of the world, and also of the wine world, because the style of the character of the wines from Australia, from the New World, totally different to the of France or also here in Italy.
Yeah, and I loved the wines initially. They were so rich and varietal and easy to understand, and quite modern looking back, but I think it was a very important step in my education, because before I left I started to realize that a lot of the wines tasted the same, and they were overly generous but not very complex, and often didn't really speak of any place or tradition. And so when I had the opportunity to take over Monte Bernardi with my family, I really felt like I had to find and kind of recreate that history and tradition here. And now I kind of jokingly but half seriously say that I learned what not to do in Australia, because I really do think the way we think about wine is completely backward. In the since basically the mid-'80s onwards, we've been saying that we're moving towards making better wines, but in reality, if you take, for example, dropping grapes, we're now in something, let's say 30 years on from when people started dropping grapes for quote unquote quality. To me, I look at it now with nearly 20 years experiences, is by now you should be able to set up your vineyards to give you the right crop instead of drop fruit that you don't need. Basically, you're pumping out nutrients and energy out of your plant to drop it on the ground. So we say it's for quality, but I think it's really a marketing thing to say for charging higher prices, but it also is kind of not very respectful. And in fact, if you go back to the old farmers of this area, when these new generations came in and they said, we've got to drop grapes, we want to make better quality, they would start to tear up and feel like you were, really disregarding the work and the passion that they put into it. And I feel that way too. I feel like the best producers manage to ripen all their grapes every year. They don't have to drop fruit, and they use everything, all of the pressings. And that's really, to me, what a good winemaker and producer should be proud to do, not dropping fruit for 30 years. Something to me doesn't add up with that. So I think we have to start thinking about what great wine is, and to me, reflecting the place is the first part, and the traditional varieties of the area, but also being kind of pragmatic and respectful and set always with an eye to quality. But that's kind of what I respect and love so much about going back to traditional ideas and concepts, is that I think they really did know what they were doing. It was much harder to ripen grapes back then than it is now. But if I don't drop a single bunch on my young vineyards that are quote unquote supposed to produce a lot of grapes, I get 5 tons to the hectare. That's like 2.2 tons to the acre. It's not a lot. So if I go back and I drop grapes because it's supposed to improve my quality, I look at that as kind of ignorant and lack of true understanding of what you're doing as a grape grower.
So, but I can imagine you didn't have had the plan to in Australia. Now I will be a Sangiovese producer. I can't imagine that it was that story. You found this place, let me say, or the place found you, let me say in that way.
I think so. Our family made a decision together to get into the wine business. I was studying winemaking in Australia. My sister was not enjoying her chosen profession, working for a big accounting firm in Berlin, and my parents were starting to talk about retirement. They were at the time living in Wiesbaden, Germany, and I think the assumption was they were going to retire in the south of France, and my sister said, well, here's an idea. Why don't you retire on a vineyard? Michael will make the wine and I'll sell it. So the idea started like that, and then we looked mainly in France and Italy, and what brought us here was a combination of factors, but mainly that from my point of view, I saw it as undervalued place with extremely great wines. And when we study winemaking, we look and we say, a Grand Cru region has the things that I mentioned earlier: high altitude, steep slopes, rocky soils, and a big drop in temperature at night. And so I'm thinking to myself, we have all these things, and we have a noble grape, and yet the region is undervalued, and so I really was drawn to that, and I'm very glad I ended up here, because I do think it's one of the great wine regions of the world. I just think that we kind of followed a Bordeaux model, and we focus more on brand and less on place and grape. And I think if we focus more on grape and place, our region would continually gain the reputation it deserves.
But the first steps for that, I think, has been decided from the consortium in the early summer. I had a podcast together with Giovanni, with the new Uga, with the new. I think it's a focus on the grapes, because the new regulations for the Gran Selezione are focused on the grapes, local grapes, and with the place where it has grown. Of course, it is always a diplomatic and political thing, but
and it's also, of course, I do think there's been a lot of improvements, but I also think at the same time we're making wrong choices that continually hide our beauty and charm. So Gran Selezione for me is basically an attempt to make super Tuscans in our own denomination. Darker, richer, softer wines, which to me are not really a reflection of our place. And so the Uga is only at the beginning applicable to the Gran Selezione, which we don't make and will never make. Another example is that they changed the discipline for the reservas, and now a reserva has to be darker, smoother.
They changed it. I didn't hear.
They did, and now unofficially it has to have a touch of oak, which is one of these things that drives me crazy from the modern world. Is how on earth did we develop a taste to want to taste oak in something that we consume? I'm not saying oak isn't useful. If it's done well, it can give sweetness and length to your wine. But if it's so prevalent that you actually taste it in the wine, you're a chef, Nina. Can you imagine putting oak chips in your beef stew? why in the world are we putting it in our wine? Why are we putting it to such a high degree? And I come to that conclusion in many ways, but most recently I had an experience again. I tasted all of the Monte Bernardi Sangioveses going back to the very first one.
Yeah.
And for my palate, the early years had too much new oak.
Yes, it had, definitely.
And that was a symbol of the times. And
yes, this was at that time. It has to have.
Yeah, it had to have that. And what we said to ourselves, but this wine will age really well, and it'll become fantastic in 10 years. Who waits 10 years to drink their wine anymore? And guess what? The wines were fantastic, but it did, for the first 7 years, there was still a note of oak in it. And it's like, and I love the wines. I'm very proud of the wines made before us as well. I think, they reflect a place and they were very well made. But to me, they are a symbol of that kind of thinking. And unfortunately, they've just added that to Reserva, that it should have a touch of oak. And that to me seems very outdated and naive to the new generations of winemakers coming up, because they're telling us they're not interested in those kind of wines anymore, and they don't look at scores, and they actually just go by what they like to drink. And that is a huge opportunity for us if we go back to our native grapes and we just show them in their natural ways. It's a huge opportunity when you come from a special place like Panzano.
Yeah. I agree because I think the Chianti Classico region has done an improvement, changing this style, this character. Because when I have been here, 1998 the first time, it was totally. It was famous or not famous. It was chic to drink EGDs, the Super Tuscans, and then once I started to drink the basic, and then I fell in love with the Sangiovese, and then the style changed. It has been more elegant, not too loud. I always say, not crying, just talking with you. And this, I think this is in the last 15 years, I would like to say, the improvement of the region, and also I think the journalists are saying. Not everybody, but almost they are happy with it. Let me say.
I see that too, and I'm happy to. My kind of metaphor for it is, for these types of wines, is we raise the whole cow and we only use the filetto.
Yeah.
Because the filetto pleases everyone, and if you think about this region, the people who lived here made these wines for generations and generations to adapt to the food.
For the food, yes, that is what I want to say. For the food.
And what was our food here? It wasn't the filet.
No.
It was the slow cooked off parts.
Yes.
Made in a very soulful and enjoyable way, and that's the.
And a lot of vegetables. And a lot of vegetables. There are so many, let me say, vegetarian dishes traditional here in Tuscany. One of my most favorite is the ribollita or the papa al pomodoro. These are so traditional dishes here, together with the wine. It's incredible, and they are without meat. So of course, the Tuscan kitchen has a big focus on meat, but also a lot of others.
Yeah, I think though, if you think of that as a symbol of, like a Poposo or a Stracotto, or, you use these offcuts and you cook them with intention and understanding, they can be so much more wonderful than a filetto.
Yes.
The filetto tastes the same in every bite.
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And to me, that's kind of, for me, it's a representative of the wines that we try to make in the wine world today. And I'm not saying just Chianti Classico, but if we try to make wines that are to get 100 points, they have to fit a certain mold.
Yeah.
You can't get 100-point wine if you have less color, if you have more acid, and you have, less rich fruits. So a lot of people still follow that as their guideline of how to make wine and sell wine. So it's kind of counter to returning to place and grape and making wines that actually suit the food from the region. If that makes sense. That's basically the way I think, and I feel like we have this gift of having this unique Sangiovese made in this very special place. And if we just take it to the simplest form and we age it well in the right format of barrels or cement, and we bring out the finesse and elegance, we really have something truly special.
I'm feeling that you're loving the Sangiovese really, so it's really your name, Mr. Sangiovese, because yes, all my listeners know that I'm also loving Sangiovese. It's a fantastic grape. We often spoke in my podcast with producers. Of course, it's not an easy grape. It's sometimes more difficult than other grapes, let me say it that way. But of course, Sangiovese is your main grape, but you have also several other grapes here. So you're not reduced only to Sangiovese. You have other local like Canaiolo and...
a little bit, yeah. We have
Colorino as well, huh?
We have basically... for our Chianti Classicos, we only have Sangiovese, Sangiovese Canaiolo, and with the exception of the MB 1933, which has...
another new baby.
Yeah, another new baby that's an old traditional field blend with many, many grapes in it. Some of which I won't mention, and but you have things like Ciligiolo and Canaiolo and Sangiovese and Colorino and Calabrese, and there's so many different varieties in there, and they all give little sentori, little sfumatori of flavors and aromas that make it really just a burst of energy and life. And it's wonderful to have that ability to make a wine from that vineyard, because you realize why they made it that way. It's just so special. And it's a shame that we don't have very many of vineyards like that still around. But for me, it's a very representative of our philosophy as well, because I like having flavors in our wines change every year. I like some years that we're going to have more Martili Rosso, like cranberries and cherry, and or some years more kind of plum and blackberry. And I like those differences.
Because they are the expression of the vintage of the year.
Exactly. And that's something that I really...
It's not Coca-Cola.
Enjoy. It's not Coca-Cola, exactly. And to me, it's what draws a lot of us to wine. And so I don't think of Sangiovese as a difficult grape variety.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah, Mr. Sangiovese.
I love it, and I used to drop the wing off the bunch when I first arrived, because I still had these kind of preconceptions from university. But I like the different dimensions that the wing gives compared to the main bunch. It's slightly less ripe than the main bunch, but if my main bunch is blackberry or black cherry or plum, it's going to give 1 or 2 degrees of lighter berry fruits.
Yeah.
And my fear is that the way we make wine now, it's like we're taking all these fruits and we're cooking them in the padella, and we're making a syrup out of it, like cassis.
Yeah.
And it's very intense and rich, but we lose all those little subtle flavors of the different dimensions of Sangiovese. And this 1933 is a fantastic representation of that, because you taste apricots, you taste cherries, you taste plums, you taste all of it in the same glass, and it's really wonderful. And I don't think there's ever been a vintage that I thought was truly difficult. I find the hot ones boring.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And boring from a grower point of view and a winemaker point of view. There was an exception. It was a recent exception, which was 2017, which I thought I was going to be less enamored with compared to other vintages, but it actually turned out to be one of the most interesting vintages. And so that really surprised me. And the way I make wine is very instinctual. I don't analyze anything. I don't know my acids or my potential alcohols until Valore Italia comes and samples 2 years, a year and a half to 2 years later. So that year, instinctively, like a cook, I used less stems than I normally would, because I assumed I'd have less acidity and more natural tannins. Yeah. But had a lot of acidity in the end. So it was an example of my instinct being off, thinking that the acidity would be lower because of the warm year it was, but it ended up being higher. So I like those kind of surprises, and I like getting those different expressions. It just makes it enjoyable to tackle each year with a new energy.
Yeah. But we talked just about the local grapes, but you have also the international grapes in the very nice wine as well, the Zingana and the little, sister, Zingarella. So you also have your experience with these grapes. Yeah. So, can you feel a huge difference between these grapes, these characters?
Yeah, I mean, from a growing point of view, they're so easy. In the sense that they can't basically have almost any kind of disease pressure, because they come from a much more climatically challenging place, Bordeaux. Yeah. So here, the amount of humidity and rain that we have, really, it's almost impossible to have any challenges from a growing point of view.
For these international grapes, like they are Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot.
Yeah, it would all go into Zingana, which is a vineyard that was top grafted by the previous owner in the late 80s.
Okay.
And I wanted to move those varieties into spots that were not suitable to grow Sangiovese, so I could continue the legacy of Zingana.
Yes.
And so that's what Zingarella is. It's a young vine version of Zingana. And then once that gets old enough and good enough to make it Zingana quality wine, we will probably pull out Zingana and plant Sangiovese in that great post, in that great position. So, but I like it more than I thought it would, because when I moved, the
Zingarella,
and Zingana,
okay,
honestly, because I was pretty anti-international when I moved here, and because it seemed counterproductive to what we were trying to do here, but it's useful to bridge gaps of understanding, because not everyone likes Sangiovese immediately, It's like not everyone likes Pinot Noir or Nebbiolo right away. It's something that I feel it's one of those varieties that you learn to love as you become more experienced taster, and then you actually like it more than all the other grape varieties. And those are probably my three favorite red varieties, maybe. But they weren't immediately when I started on the road of tasting wine. So I like that. Here it's really nice to have those varieties, and so that we can help people start to understand what Panzano and our soils and our climate influence, what part of it comes from the place and what part of it comes from the grape. Because if you taste the Zingano or Zingarella, there's still a lot of things that really say Panzano, like the sweet and sour fruit and the earthiness and the tannin qualities. I think there's those in both the Chianti Classicos and the Zingano and the Zingarella, and that's something that you get from a very special area like this.
Yeah, and I know that you have your philosophy: don't touch the grapes or the plants, let me say almost, until you harvest. This is because it's always a big experience also for me to talk with you, because you don't touch it, don't put away the leaves or your...
Well, it's again going back to what I said earlier, is I think if you truly are good at growing, you should be able to find the balance in the canopy and the number of bunches you want and ripen them every year without having to do a lot of work. What we do is we prune, and then we tie, and we arch our shoots, and we renew them every year, because Sangiovese needs to be renewed every year. It doesn't work very well with cordon. And then when the shoots get above the top wire, we wrap them along. We don't hedge trim. And that's hand labor that a lot of people don't want to do, but it actually saves us labor down the line in the growing season, but it also keeps the balance in the canopy, so that we actually get the right amount of leaves, which gives us the right amount of shading and sun on our bunches. The last thing I want to do is remove the leaves over my bunches, because then I get too much sun, and it lowers my acidity, and it raises the tannins that need to be ripened before harvest, and gives a very ripe fruit spectrum flavor to the wine. So I really want splotches of shade and splotches of sun on my bunches. So if we're doing things right, there's nothing else we need to do. If we're not going to drop the bunches, we're not going to remove the leaves, we're really just getting that balance right from making all the right decisions in the vineyard beforehand. If you're dropping 30% to 50% fruit, you're doing something wrong. In my opinion, you should have been able to figure out how to give yourself the right amount of fruit by now. And like I said, you're just wasting nutrients and energy, and so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense as a grower. Can you imagine a producer of apples or oranges or whatever dropping 30% or 50% of their crop every year? It just doesn't make sense.
But I think it changes all. It starts changing thinking for the producers. I think.
I really want young producers to understand and appreciate in Italy how special these native grapes are, and expressing them in their most unadulterated, let's say, less modern, is actually their biggest advantage in the wine world, because they've been pre-selected for them over generations and generations by very, very good instinctual farmers. and that is something that no New World country has yet. They're working on it, but it's going to take them a long time to get there.
So let me finish this show with this instinctional farmer you are as well, as you told before. From the bottom of my heart, I wish you all the best for you and for your wines, because I enjoy them very much, and so I'm looking forward to your wines in the next years, and good weather situations, and don't touch the grapes.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, for me as well. I'm always learning something, so it's an education for me. Grazie.
Na, ich hoffe, ich habe dir nicht zu viel versprochen. Michael hat wirklich einen ganz besonderen Zugang zum Weinbau, finde ich. Vielleicht hast auch jetzt du Lust bekommen, die Weine, den besonderen Charakter der Weine von Monte Bernardi selbst zu verkosten. Natürlich findest du den Link zu den Weinen von Monte Bernardi in meinem Onlineshop ninainchianti.com in den Shownotes. Und natürlich auch den Link zum heutigen Wein, den wir im Glas hatten, dem Sangiovese. Wenn du noch Fragen haben solltest, die sich vielleicht in dieser Podcast-Episode für dich ergeben haben oder überhaupt zum Thema Chianti Classico, dann kannst du mir gerne eine Nachricht dazu senden. Auch diesen Link findest du wie immer in den Shownotes. Wenn dir mein Podcast gefällt, dann kannst du diesen auch abonnieren. Das würde mich natürlich freuen. Und wie immer hoffe ich, dass ich dich auch heute mitnehmen konnte in meine Chianti Classico Welt, denn das ist meine Passion, mein Auftrag, so fühle ich es zumindest. Bis zum nächsten Mal hoffentlich. Ich freue mich auf dich. Ciao, a presto.
Chianti Wein, Gott und keinen